Well, okay. It doesn't give me any chance to adjust my camera before it sends me live. So live and learn, I guess. All right. Well, this is my first time going live, I think, directly on YouTube, I believe. If I have done it before, it's been a very long time. Usually I do Facebook and I just upload it to YouTube. So this should be an interesting conversation. I say conversation, it's just me, I guess. But how many people really even know that on 9/11 there was a lawsuit going on in the Pentagon? A lawsuit that would have disturbed much of America, disturbed the drug trade, disturbed the pedophilia network, and changed America as you know it. And there was a reason that the Pentagon was hit on 9/11. This stuff was planned so far in advance. So if you think about this, I mean, even a lot of people already know that the Pentagon construction began on 9/11, when it was first built. And it was built by Leslie Groves and the Groves family. And there was a lawsuit on 9/11 going on that was filed in Michigan at a courthouse. And it was against the Groves family. That case made it all the way to the Pentagon, and that is why the Pentagon had to be destroyed on 9/11 as it was. Now, I want to hold that thought because this story is huge. It's just absolutely massive. And so we're going to go back. I've got plenty of time, and we're going to really talk about where this story started, why it's covered up in all media, who's covering it up. And as you can see, you might notice some of the names on here. Stop, Osbourne, and Graham. There's your first hint. We'll get into that more. Stop, Osbourne, and Graham if you want to greatly hinder pedophilia. If you want to greatly hinder the drug trade, these two names need to be shouted from the mountaintops and exposed to the world. And you say, oh, like Senator Graham? Yes. And I don't mean that Senator Graham himself is responsible for all of it, but the Graham family. Okay. And he's a cog in the wheel, a piece of the puzzle. Does that mean that he himself is a pedophile? I have no evidence of that, and I'm not going to say that he himself is a pedophile. I have no evidence. I can't claim that. But his family, Graham and Osbourne. Well, Osbourne is definitely part of the pedophile network, and we're going to talk about that some more in great detail. Starting with this name, Hugh Squier. This is the name that needs to be made more famous than any other name in America. It is the name that is being talked about in tons of movies, in tons of Hollywood movies, in hundreds, if not thousands of songs all over the world. And yet nobody knows who he is because the way that they talk about him is intended to cover up who he is and to profit from covering up who he is and what they did to him. So you have undoubtedly heard a huge part of Hugh's story. You've heard it in films and in songs by the hundreds. You just didn't know it. Just about every song that is made in some way or another is marking Hugh in some way or another. And I know it's a huge claim, and I don't say that all songs are, but if the people or the names of the people that create the music in this country do not adhere in some way to covering up the big story, then they'll never become famous. You ever wonder why some people become famous and others don't? You say, well, some people are really talented and other people not so talented. And yet the untalented people sometimes just, I think, like Johnny Cash, for example, Johnny Cash could barely play a guitar and could barely sing, right? Yet they made him real famous. Well, why? because he walked the line. And that word, the line, is extremely important. Okay, and that's why that's a bigger part of the reason why Johnny Cash became famous. And people don't understand that the music industry marks somebody, steals from some people. They know it a little bit. Okay, they get a little inkling when they know, like rappers a lot of times will kill somebody. Okay, to get their position. Well, that is all music. That is all film. That is all industry, and that is an epic phenomenon that is all the time. Murders are done daily to advance and make money for movies and music. Not very many. I didn't understand this until Hugh explained this to me. You ever wonder why, like recently you had, there's hundreds of murders every day around the world, dozens in this country, not anymore, just about every single day. And yet every now and then a story like Gabby Petito will suddenly just be surrounded by all media and is beaten ad nauseum. Why do they choose one story out of those hundreds of murders that happen every day? In Chicago, that's, if you don't have 300 people shot on the weekend anymore in Chicago, it's a slow weekend, but they'll pick one person like Gabby Petito and gravitate, and all media will cover it. Why? What made that story so much more important than the 80 people shot in Chicago the same weekend, or and around the country, probably hundreds of people shot. And that reason is that person, when you see media gathering together like that, that person was murdered to promote something. You may not know what it is, you may not be able to figure it out, but that person's murder was paid for and will make money for somebody. Will she get a book? Will somebody get a book deal or a movie deal out of this murder? I don't know. It may come to light. We may never figure it out perfectly. The names will almost always mark Hugh Squier in some way or another, or his lives or his wives that were murdered, and they've been using Hugh since the 1960s, at least, and his father before that, because his family owned massive, valuable patents that were worth, I guess you could say, trillions of dollars by now. It wouldn't have been trillions then necessarily. And it goes all the way back to the 1800s. So they own the Van patents. They made the first movies. They wrote Elvis's music. Their family made the first movie, or the first television series, rather, Make Room for Daddy. When was that? Back in the 40s or 50s or something originally? I don't remember. And that was the Gardner family. That's Hugh's aunt. Like Ava Gardner and Sinatra, Mickey Rooney, that was married to Ava Gardner. That's Hugh's family, aunts and uncles right there. Hugh received an inheritance and has some papers, or that he would have received the inheritance, but it was stolen from him by the Gardners and others. That would have been worth massive, massive amounts of money. And that theft had to be covered up. That theft is the biggest covered up truth in all of American history. That is what led to 9/11. That's why Bush on 9/11 said Hugh's name. Actually, you didn't hear it, but if you want to go through my videos, Hugh captured it on 9/11. He captured the film as it was. He recorded it. And I have it on some of my videos. You can go through and see Hugh's name being mentioned by name by George Bush on 9/11. He says, "Oh, Hugh's structures are collapsing." And that's because they were covering up the theft that they stole from Hugh and his family. And it goes all the way back to the 1950s. This should blow people's mind. When you go back to 1953, the year that Hugh was born, you will discover that that the number 53 is all over the media. You don't pay attention, so you don't notice it. However, I'm a little autistic, okay, a little Asperger's, and I notice things that people don't notice all the time. And before I ever met Hugh, I had a compilation of how many times the number 53, I just kept, getting screenshots and stuff. Every time I saw the number 53 on news stories and in songs and videos, and I just take a screenshot and I was like, this is unreal. Why do they keep repeating that number? Well, I just noticed it, right? Nobody told me. Just because I'm more observant than some people on some things. And then I come to find out, well, that was the year he was born. And so they mark it ad nauseum all over. Pay attention as you watch movies and look for that number 53. Because that was the year that he was born. 4 years later, Hugh was raped as a 4-year-old boy, taken, captured, chained to a toilet. The picture of the toilet was actually in a magazine once. And he has a picture of it. I have it in my archives. Okay. Yeah, they actually put the picture of the toilet in a basement in a magazine. I mean, this is how sick these people are that run your media. All right. Now, honestly, I can't remember the name of the media of the magazine at the moment. It may have even been a website, but I have a picture of it. I have the picture that he found and he said this is the exact toilet and exact basement that they chained me to. As a 4-year-old boy, he was captured by Osbourne, who happens to be related to a former governor of Michigan, Osbourne. And it's no coincidence that Osbourne was the governor of Kansas right before The Wizard of Oz was written originally, too. More about Osbourne and The Wizard of Oz in just a minute. But the 4-year-old Hugh Squier was chained to a toilet. They shoved shards of wood, I think it was, up his fingernails. They murdered people in front of other little kids. He wasn't the only one. At times, and this was not the only time that he was taken. It wasn't just Osbourne that was doing it. Singer Daryl Hall, Hall & Oates, that guy, was in the room masturbating in the corner, watching these pedophiles rape kids and Hugh right there. You understand how big this is? This is why they had to cover this up, man. This is the stuff that led to JFK's murder, to Jimmy Hoffa, to 9/11, and all these stories are connected, and people don't know it. The Oklahoma City bombing, every single one of these stories, the Las Vegas shooting, every single one of these things are connected through Hugh Squier's story. All of them. So Daryl Hall was there, and so was Anderson and Andrews and Osbourne. Now you will see Anderson all over the media too. Oh, Mr. Anderson in The Matrix, right? They made Anderson the good guy when in real life he was the bad guy. That's just a small example of how movies they mimic Hugh's life and cover up the truth in order to profit from the lie. All right, and what they did to him. Remember, his family wrote Elvis's songs. His family made movies. His family made patents for the tractors back in the 1800s, the Harris steam thrasher. This is the famous Harris family. He's literally the last living male descendant from the Harris line of Clara Harris, who was with Lincoln at Ford's Theater. And that's why his uncle was the caretaker at Ford Mansion in Detroit. This is a famous family. This is why these things are going on. This is why these things had to be covered up. Okay, they raped somebody from that family, and they murdered his many of his aunts with his grandma and his grandmother in semi trucks long before he was born. They've been attacking this family for a long time. So in that basement, you had Osbourne and Long, handed him over to pedophiles with Wallace. Now, that's an interesting name. Let's talk about Wallace for a second, because his first grade teacher, Mrs. She told everybody that she was related to Governor Wallace. Okay, he would hear her talk about that in the first grade. You see, there wasn't just one rape when he was 4 years old. They kept doing it. Okay, he escaped the first time, but they would also continue to rape him, and his teachers would hand him over. Well, Mrs. Wallace was actually Mrs. Hamilton, who played the Wicked Witch on The Wizard of Oz. So now you have Oz and Osbourne. And who was the Scarecrow? Wallace. Okay. That was his name. His last name was Wallace. Okay. I don't remember his first name, but you can look it up. So the actual teacher from the Wicked Witch, who's related to the governor, who's related to Osborne, who's other governors, and Long, who was another, I think, teacher at a school, if I'm not mistaken, they would hand Hugh over to Osborne to be raped and captured and tortured with other kids after school. I mean, the Wicked Witch was literally very wicked. She, very apt role for her. If you look back to like how much they made making the Wizard of Oz, you see why she became a teacher later. It's not a coincidence that Judy Garland, was on the Wizard of Oz, and just in this election, Joe Biden, within 24 hours of Hoff winning the Senate seat, chose Garland as the Attorney General. That's because even today they're still covering up what they did to Hugh as far back as 1957. And it is related to the Wizard of Oz. And it's not the only movie. Tons of movies are like this, marking Hugh and what they did. And the pedophiles who did it profit from it. We've already mentioned The Matrix and the Wizard of Oz. There's two, but there's thousands. We could just mention just about any of them. It's unbelievable. Now, Hugh is smarter than most people, okay? I mean, a lot smarter, like a lot, okay? His uncle, and it must be in the genes. His uncle invented the geodesic dome. If you go to Disney World at the Epcot Center and you see that big golf ball thing, that's a geodesic dome. And that was his name was Buckminster Fuller. Okay, and this is why you just had a murder in Chicago of a police officer in the Fuller area off the Dan Ryan. Okay, that's not a coincidence because the names Dan and Ryan are real important to Hugh's life, and the policeman was murdered right there in the Fuller area. The news stories are like this constantly. Okay, Dan was Dan Cooper, or D.B. Cooper in other media reports and other lies that were invented to hide Hugh's story. Dan was the Cooper that raped one of his kids. Okay. So anyway, back to 1957. So the year that he was first originally raped, in 1957, his uncle, one of his many uncles, his grandma had tons of kids. So when I say uncle, it might be a great uncle, it might be a in-law uncle or something like that. But one of his uncles was the very famous and well-known Admiral Byrd. Now, he is covered up in today's media with lies about people saying that he discovered the center of the earth in Antarctica and that he left a secret diary. Okay, this is a lie and a cover-up. Hugh says, no, this is my family member. All of my family knew him. He did not leave a diary. But the very year that Hugh was captured and raped by the pedophiles in Osborne's basement is the very year that Admiral Byrd died. However, his mother, Hugh's mother, says he did not just die naturally. Now, you'll read that in the news, just like you'll hear that Jim Marrs died naturally, but Jim Marrs died of a heart attack. But author Jim Marrs was looking into Hugh's story and checking out his tax information. Jim Marrs is a real smart guy. He had the resources and the money to look into these things, and he just happened to die as he was prepping to write Hugh Squier's book, of a heart attack. Right. This is the real truth of your country, folks. So Admiral Byrd also, like Jim Marrs, was murdered, even though you'll read differently in the news. And his mother told Hugh that all the way back when he was a little kid. So in the year that Hugh was first that he remembers first being captured in 1957, Admiral Byrd was murdered. And remember, Admiral Byrd, I mean, that's an admiral. Okay, this is an admiral in the Navy. And if you think that's weird, well, Patton was murdered too, wasn't he? Okay, Patton's no relation to Hugh, but that World War II generation was being murdered, and you got a replacement government that is still covering up what they did today. That's why you had Biden come up and give you Garland within 24 hours after the election of Ossoff. This has been going on for every generation since they took over after World War II. Okay, they killed off Hugh's family. And they'd been attacking Hugh's family for some time, but they made a great, huge advancement into running this country between 1957 and 1963. And of course, that 1963 was the year JFK was murdered. And you'll notice the number 114 a lot, and this is why you will find that the police code created 114. Is that JFK was murdered from 114 Elm Street. So then you got Nightmare on Elm Street to cover it up. You see what the media does. You see what the news does, by a German, who was George Bush on 9/11? A German, right? German name. And so you had Osbourne and Oswald. Let's talk about them for a minute. All right. Like I said, Hugh was captured in Osborne's basement, chained to a toilet, raped and tortured, hung by nets. Very bad things happened to him and to other kids. And in 1963, and I have the video, Mac Osbourne, was in the military barracks with Oswald, okay, OS, because they had the same last names. They were together, okay? So the Osbourne family, the gay pedophiles, this is why you hear a lot about Dave Ferry in relation to, in certain books, in relation to the JFK assassination. Why was another gay pedophile talked about so much, by certain people that I'm not going to mention on this video. And that's because there were gay pedophiles who raped you, who have taken over much of your country. It's not a coincidence that Mike Osbourne runs the sex crimes division of the FBI to this day. And Gina Osbourne was with him, and I think she moved on to do true crimes. This is why you see true crimes videos usually covering up murders with even more lies. So this has been going on for so long, and you'll see it in all movie and all TV and in all radio and all music. Lies covering up more lies, covering up more lies, covering up more lies. This is the biggest story never told in this country. So I hope you'll help me make these names famous. I hope that you'll share this video and say, wow, I had no idea. So Graham and Osbourne, Byrd was captured in 1957, or murdered in 1957, as Hugh was captured and raped and tortured. And in 1963, Kennedy was killed. Well, but now I started to tell you that Hugh is a very smart person, smarter than anybody I've ever met. We spent a lot of time talking. He's been telling me a story for a very long time. We spend hours a day talking about it. So I've got thousands of pages of notes, okay, and tons of research into what he's been telling me. So I know that what he's telling me is 100% authentic, okay? There's no question whatsoever about what he's saying. In 1963, Kennedy was talking to Hugh subvertly. You'll never hear this in the media, of course. You can't just Google this and find it. But Kennedy was saying to you Tribune publishers, do you realize, okay, this is 1963. Hugh was 10 years old. This is why it's important to understand that Hugh is smarter than most people. This is why I'm tying this together for you. Hugh is actually, I don't know, a savant, like his uncle Buckminster Fuller that created the geodesic dome. And it's got to be just related to his family. He's an amazing chalk artist. He can perform all kinds of amazing calculations in his head. And he doesn't really like to talk about it. And I understand that. But I feel like it's a real important piece of the information because people are going to ask, well, why at 10 years old was the president of the United States talking to you? Well, Hugh at 10 years old had already become a publisher. His band was in the Chicago Tribune that year. And I have the picture. Okay. Not making it up. Okay. And so Kennedy was an exceptionally smart individual, smarter than people realize. And very subtly, he was saying to you Tribune publishers, he was really talking to Hugh. Okay. Right before he was murdered. Okay, this is the big speech that he gave, that big famous speech where it looked like he was just about to expose the CIA. The CIA didn't kill Kennedy. Try to understand that. This is Osbourne, the pedophiles, killed Kennedy. Mac Osbourne was with Oswald, and that's why Oswald was set up. They were in the barracks together. Oh, hey, Northern Risen's here. How you doing, buddy? Good to see you. So Osbourne was with Oswald, and that's why Oswald was set up by gay pedophiles. Does that mean that I hate all gays? Now, let's not, don't go there, okay? I'm not here to tell you that I'm out to, bash anyone or go out to change whatever people do. As long as they stay away from me, I really don't care what people do, right? Just, leave me alone, let me live my life, right? But if you're a pedophile and you rape kids, I want your name shouted from the housetop, okay? I want to make you famous, okay? That's what I want. There's a lot more names we could mention, but we're not going to, not in this video. I don't want to make it too complicated. It's complicated enough because Hugh's story is the truth of so many events all the way back from the 50s, starting with the Kennedy starting with Admiral Byrd and then the Kennedy assassination. All right. And why did the president of the United States address Hugh Squier, the 10-year-old Hugh Squier? Hugh had already started getting his federal FCC licenses. He had them all at 12 years old. Okay. Who can do that? Sure, I couldn't pass the test right now if I studied for it for 3 years. All right. But that's why it's important to understand that he's exceptionally smart, okay? Still is today. He has a crystal clear memory of things that go all the way back to the 50s. I mean, who can do that? And his whole life's like that. He can tell you every freaking name of everybody that's connected to everybody perfectly because he's just got this incredible memory. People say, "Oh, this is a crazy guy. He's injecting this." No, this is a guy whose mind is like nobody else, okay? Nobody else I've ever met. That's why the story Rain Man was actually created, was actually to cover up, him and his family, because he and his family are those kinds of geniuses. And not the only thing that he did in his life. I mean, he's done so many other things, inventions and the stud finder. He actually created that at the job he was working at. Somebody took it and made millions of dollars from it. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that he did. So, going back to Kennedy, why was Kennedy talking to the 10-year-old Hugh Squier? Well, Hugh had been writing letters to the president of the United States and getting responses. He had the letters until Osbourne broke into his house and stole them, okay, into the place he was living, one house at the time. All right, another Osbourne. That's not a coincidence. Now, what was he writing about? He was writing about getting America to reform the Berne, Berne Convention. Okay, that goes back to the 1800s. Bern, Switzerland. It's a city in Switzerland where the world, you have other the Nuremberg trial, stuff like that. You have Geneva Convention, stuff like that. Well, this was the Berne Convention, and the Berne Convention is how people get money for their creations in the media, and it governs a lot of that and how royalties are handled and that sort of thing. Well, Hugh at 8, 9, 10 years old was writing to the president of the United States about this and getting responses finally, in the 80s, late 80s, it actually was adopted. All right. And really think about this, because it was adopted real close to the same time Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage were out there saying, oh, the Twin Towers are going to come crumbling down, as they were fighting that other tag team in 1989. All right. So it did finally pass. Okay. And the Berne Convention was reformed. Okay. Our adherence in our government to the Berne Convention. And literally every musician and every actor and every producer in this country should be thanking Hugh for what he did. He had letters from all the senators. He had letters from all the House representatives as he continued to push this issue all the way up into the 80s. Okay. Into I think it was the 99th, 100th, and 101st Congress, I think, were the ones that finally started debating it and pushing it forward until it finally passed. If I'm not mistaken. Okay, I think that's right, though. Now, that's why the president of the United States would talk to him, and he's technically related to Kennedy also. That shouldn't be surprised. You know, this is part of the reason why Frank Sinatra, who was, like I said, Ava Gardner was Hugh's aunt. Ava Gardner was married to Frank Sinatra. This is why Frank Sinatra was investigated for the murder of the president. He wasn't charged. He was investigated by the Congress of the United States. Okay. This is a big family. This is the story never told. This is what's covered up in all media today. So that's just, we've only got to 1963, to the 10-year-old Hugh Squier. And already we have rapes and murders. We have the murder of a president. We have the murder of Admiral Byrd of the Pacific Fleet. All this covered up with all the nonsense stories that you hear today. You know, MK Ultra, you know, coming over after World War II. You know, those are the geniuses. No. That's the cover up Hugh as well. Okay. This is why you have Emily Barr, pretending like she's an MK Ultra victim today out of Detroit. Oh, who was our last attorney general before Garland of the Wizard of Oz? Barr. Now, this will blow your mind. Who runs Graham Media in Detroit? Emily Barr. You understand that? All right. This is the connections between the Graham family, the lies and the cover-up and the fake stories like MK Ultra. It doesn't mean there was no MK Ultra. It doesn't mean there was no Operation Paperclip. But they've been exaggerated to cover up the real truth that's related to the murder of your president through Hugh Squier. Doesn't mean these things didn't happen. Aliens are used every day to cover up Hugh's story. Okay? Doesn't, you know, maybe there's aliens, maybe there's not. There's room for discussion on that, you know. I'm open, whatever. I don't really think so, but, you know, everybody's entitled to their opinion. But you got in the media, S4. Squier at 4 years old, S4. That's why they call the area where they keep the aliens S4. Okay. And this is why you see the number 4 and 44 constantly all over the media. Watch that number 44. I can't even tell you how many movies have the number 44 in it and the number 47 in it. Really think about these numbers for a second, because Hugh was captured and stolen or raped at 4 years old. Okay. His 4 wives were murdered, 4 and 4. So they doubled him. And they killed his twin back in 1957. His twin brother was his mom kind of hid this from him for a while, but eventually kind of led on to him what had happened. Okay. This twin boy, who was the exact spitting image of Hugh Squier, came into his kindergarten class 1 year before the Wizard of Oz, you know, from Son of Sam at 44 all over it. Well, gosh, watch the media. You'll see 44 everywhere. And I mean everywhere. So Hugh's twin brother comes into the class, and his whole class is like, whoa, this kid looks just like you, Hugh. And Hugh had never seen him before at this point. This kid was, she's not even really sure what his mom did, okay, or exactly how it happened. Because, I mean, he's only 4 years old, okay? or 5 years old, right? It's kindergarten. And this boy was murdered and put in a box, and a book was written about it called The Boy in the Box. I bought the book. And not surprisingly, the author of the book starts the book out addressing Mr. H. Oh, who's that? Well, that's Hugh Squier. But he never mentions Hugh, never tells the truth of the pedophiles, never tells the real story that's going on. And wouldn't you know it, where that boy was found in Pennsylvania is the same place, or pretty close to the same place, where the plane went down on 9/11 in Pennsylvania. As Hugh has a case against the Groves family, the very family that created the Pentagon, that started construction on 9/11, that had been filed in federal court and was in the Pentagon. That's why they destroyed those offices in the Pentagon. Can you imagine? Look, I mean, they've been killing Admiral Byrd and Patton and the President of the United States. There's a case about this. It could come to the surface. Do you see how important it was for them to destroy that office in the Pentagon where that case had come? Oh, and they just so happened to drop a plane in the field where his twin brother was buried back in 1958. Wow. Have you ever in your life heard that there was a case against the Pentagon on 9/11? As 9/11 happened? No, you never heard that anywhere, because that's the kind of information that's been crushed on all media. Unbelievable. That's why these names need to be made famous, and I hope that this video will get shared like no other video you've ever encountered, because where else have you heard this story? You can't Google this story, can you? No, you'll never hear any of it. This is the kind of information that's been crushed. Not MK Ultra victims, not alien victims, not people that were taken captive by aliens. Those stories of people saying that, maybe they were, maybe they weren't. I don't care. The reason they're pushed forward into all media is to cover up this. Now, we're still all the way back in 1963 in JFK and massive amounts of murders. Well, Hugh, he moved forward with his life. He's just a brilliant guy. He gets his FCC license and he starts a band. Now, this is more important than anything else. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe the most important thing. The name of the band was called Bottom Line. Now, when he trademarked the name of his band, Bottom Line, a trademark has to be not in the dictionary for it to become a legal trademark. You have to invent that word. All right. Now, after he invented the word, or at least trademarked it, and he thinks he invented it, but at least that he was the first one to trademark it. Then they put it in the dictionary years later. Okay. But at the time, it wasn't in the dictionary. That name, Bottom Line, okay, was stolen from him as he was 15, 16, 17 years old originally, playing with very famous people in high school, the same high school that Mitch Ryder went to, okay, and just a few years before him, I believe, and so many others, okay. He was a famous person, okay. His band that as a teenager is going to bars back in the early 60s and charging $15 per person. So he's making $4 or $5, $6 grand a night in some parts of his life when he's going to these massive bars, and he's getting real famous. Okay. But and he was on the radio for a while until Hoffa was killed. And then we'll get into Hoffa as that's the next part of our story. So why was Hoffa murdered? Okay. Well, you might come to different conclusions on why Hoffa was murdered, but this is what we know. The night that he was disappeared, Hugh's mother-in-law was with Hoffa at the Sly Fox. Hugh had joined the Teamsters the day that Hoffa disappeared, the very day. His company was on strike, and he was driving a semi-truck. He was also playing for Bottom Line, I believe, but he also drove a truck. Okay, not all of his life did he make a ton of money, okay, I guess. Maybe you can kind of straighten out the details a little bit, but at the time he was working for a place called Morrison. This is why, Jim Morrison was killed, by the way, in the media. This all goes together. And in France, and French people like, what's his name? Billy Craig became, I can't get the story straight in my head. I'm sorry. But Frenchmen came and stole his name. Okay. And his trademark too. Some French singers that were introduced by, what's that Jew? The Jewish guy. I can't think of his name. Howard Stern, introduced by Howard Stern in America. I wish my brain didn't do this. I'm sorry, but it happens. There's so many details to this story. It's so big. I just can't keep on. Yeah, no, there is. I'm very familiar with that. 77's all around 9/11. Yeah. 77 minutes after takeoff. Yeah, I know that. Yeah, that's very important. Because the people who did this to Hugh did it. They used a military code. Okay. In England, you have the, what is it called? The Office of Codes and Ciphers. Okay. So they actually, just like our Pentagon and our NSA does and our CIA does, they use military codes and numbers to hide things that they do. Okay. This is not gematria, by the way. Okay. The gematria calculator and things like that have been used to cover up even further, like other media, the real truth of Hugh's story. The real truth that actually happened, okay, is not gematria, okay? And there's historical gematria. There's gematria in the Bible, okay, things like that. That's all real. But the gematria calculator that you see on YouTube and so forth, the purpose of that is actually to cover up Hugh's story, because the military codes that they used on Hugh and that they used in the media, I've already mentioned a few numbers like 44 and 53, okay, and 47. Well, why 47? Why do we hear 47 constantly? That's Hugh's birthday. He was born on 7/4. Why is 53 constantly in the media like 44? Oh, because he was born in 53. Now here's another number you'll hear all the time. Now this is not gematria. This is military codes of how the military has been marking him in movies. If you look at Hugh's baby pictures on the year he was born, okay, moms took him for baby pictures and he still has them, okay. On the back of the pictures, you have stamped on there George Towers. Oh, George Bush took down the Twin Towers, right? And the pictures were taken on 9/11. And for whatever reason, they put a 4 with Roman numerals IV and a 2. Somebody drew that back then, and it has the number 44 wrote on it. He doesn't know why they put him on there. I don't know, but they're written on the back, and some of it's stamped on the back. George Towers on 9/11 took his baby pictures. Okay, this is why you see, and remember, he's born on July 4th, 4/7 or 7/4. Sometimes they turn it around. You see these numbers, 44, 42, 47, all over the media, and 53, like ad nauseum. Like so much so that I had observed it before I met Hugh and had a compilation of the number 53 already on my computer and was asking, why do they keep showing this number? Okay. So this is military code. And we know that the military does this. Now they've changed the name of it in England, but they used to have an Office of Code and Ciphers. Okay. Big, huge building too. Well, if they do it, our military does it too. And it was a military takeover after World War II that killed Patton and Byrd and the president of the United States and was attacking Hugh's family through pedophiles. There's a word that everybody should learn. Okay. It's called peerage. 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 Okay. And peerage is the Queen's not family, but positions that she appoints that you can pass down from generation to generation. Okay. So the monarchy of England, I should say, not just the Queen. And some of those peerage with inheritable titles was Osborne. Yeah. The Knights of the Queen have been attacking this country. If you just look it up, you can find court cases in the Supreme Court, Osborne versus Harris, and things like this, all the way back in the 1800s. These are the Knights of the Queen's family. This is why you have the Wizard of Oz. This is why the Wizard of Oz is related to Osborne, to the gold standard. This is why you had the yellow brick road on there, and you had munchkins. Oh, little people, pedophiles. Okay, this is what it's all about. This is Osborne. And this is why you have Biden, the president of the United States, and they choose their names on purpose. Biden chose Judy Garland's, not really family, but the namesake Garland, as Attorney General 24 hours after Ossoff won his election in Georgia. Okay. Covering up the same truth. Biden, his name is Biden on purpose because he's a bisexual. He's a submissive to Biden or to Obama. Okay. And I don't want to go any more details because if you're smart, you already understand what I'm saying, and an adult. But I don't know who's going to watch this, so I'm not going to go any further. So you don't have to hide it from your kids, okay? Just like you had Peter Buttigieg, that's how I say it. You say it how you want. Who's from South Bend in? Gee, can you picture all that in your head? Oh, and what is South Bend in? Oh, there were books by a certain person that I'm not going to name in this video who lived and came from that same town. Oh, and what did she write about? Oh, the Kennedy assassination. Okay. There's very good reasons why I can't talk about that. I can't tell you why. Okay. But if you're real smart, you'll figure it out. Somebody that wrote about other pedophiles like David Ferry. All right. And gee, why all the gay pedophiles? Why are we hiding the gay pedophiles? All because a gay pedophile killed Kennedy. Not Osborne, or not Oswald, Osborne. And Mac Osborne just happened to be in the military barracks. I got the video. You can go through my videos and see it for yourself. In the barracks with Oswald. So that's who set him up. Gay pedophiles killed your president. That was the takeover of the military in 1963 against Hugh's family. And like I said, they've been attacking him for generations. So anyway, I was talking about Hoffa, and I guess I got sidetracked. So Hoffa, Hugh's mother-in-law was with Hoffa the day that Hoffa died. He had just joined the Teamsters. He was driving for Morrison, a truck company that delivered CO2 tanks. One of the places he's delivered CO2 to, by the way, happened to be the airbrush painter Vargas, who painted Marilyn Monroe for Hugh Hefner. That's just one of the places. He also delivered air tanks to Sean's Back Door, which was a gay bar. And now you have Sean Hannity, who just happened to get national syndication one day before 9/11. Of course, that's completely believable and no chance that's a coincidence, right? So the FBI set up Hugh on the day that Hoffa was murdered by having a guy named Whitey. He may or may not have been the original Whitey Bulger. Hugh's not sure. However, the real Whitey Bulger that you know in the stories just happened to get murdered in prison in Hazleton, West Virginia. He was from Hazel Park, Michigan. And the same month that they killed Hugh's last wife. Okay. I'm sure that's just all coincidence, right? But the FBI set up somebody named Whitey, gave Hugh a car that had been, not gave, but sold Hugh a car that had been used in a robbery the day before Hoffa was killed. And the FBI, knowing this, okay, no doubt, detained Hugh with his whole family in the car that he, the day that Hoffa was murdered. Where have you read or seen in a movie that Hugh Squier was detained by the FBI for the murder of Jimmy Hoffa? Let alone anything about where he's buried. We'll get into that in a second. Where in your life have you ever heard or seen that story told? It's not. It's covered up in all media. All the coast-to-coast people wrote books about it. All lies. Oh, somebody said Sirhan did it. Oh, like Sirhan killed Bobby Kennedy. Oh, another mobster. All lies. 100% lies. Okay. Never mentioning Hugh a single time. But you know who was mentioned as the first person arrested for the murder of Jimmy Hoffa? O'Brien. And O'Brien goes around with Roseanne Barr, who we've already talked about, pretending she's an MK Ultra victim. And Hugh knew Kathy O'Brien, and Roseanne Barr's mom knew Hugh's mom. And, Hugh used to go to their house in Michigan as a little kid. If I got the story perfectly straight. So, and Hugh happens to know some facts about that family that most people don't know. But I won't get into that because there's too many details and I can't say everything. If I say everything, and just people get lost, and it's already enough here to get lost in. So, where was Jimmy Hoffa buried then? Well, it just so happened, okay, that the few days before Hoffa was buried, his father-in-law, his name was Bud, a former policeman in Michigan, had dug a big hole in his yard. He owned a lot of property, had a ranch. Hugh had a horse there. The property might have even been his daughter's. I may have got that partly confused, but it was either his house or his daughter's. I can't remember. And anyway, they dug a big hole there. And other policemen had been digging holes too, because in Michigan, it was kind of like a thing when the police are going to hide a body. They all dig a hole. And so if it's ever discovered, they don't know which hole it was buried in. Well, that happened that day. And for some reason, when Hugh went to go pick up his family there at his father-in-law's place where he was at, the hole was filled in. Well, that's strange. And his beautiful white horse that only he knew and had trained to understand and respond to his voice, okay? Hugh's voice. He had this really great white horse and a special breed. I don't even remember the breed, but the horse would respond to his voice, right? And his father-in-law lied and said he sold the horse, but nobody else could have ever used that horse because it was specially trained uniquely to respond to his voice. And the hole was filled in. Well, Hugh goes down to pick up his wife, and at the house, the hole's filled in, and his father-in-law comes to the door and shoots at him. Well, he'd had no beef with him before, had no problem with him before. And the man's former wife was with Jimmy Hoffa that night. Go figure that out. So what happened exactly? Hugh believes that the body of Jimmy Hoffa was buried in that hole where his horse is buried. That was filled in that night. It's in New Haven, Michigan. Don't need to give any more details. They've already lied and said the body's in. As Hugh gives this information, the media pays attention to everything he does and creates cover-up news stories. The latest one is that the body's in New Jersey now. Okay, always changing the facts, always changing the information. And who knows? They may have dug him up and buried him in New Jersey. I don't know. So, what an amazing story. And here we're just talking about, now we're in 1975. Okay. So look at all the things that have happened in Hugh's life. And it's still not even a fraction of the story. There's so many more things I could say. So I'm pointing out some of the biggest things like JFK and the child and Hoffa and the rape and murder in Osbourne's basement and the Wizard of Oz. And how it connects all the way to this day with Joe Biden. Well, around this time, up until Hoffa was murdered, the day Hoffa murdered, this quit. Okay, little kids were being murdered and put on streets that had the names of Hugh's family, King and Gardner, and they kept doing this. They kept murdering little kids, trying to get Hugh. I don't know. Were they trying to get him to shut up, or were they just threatening him, or basically making it say? Now, he wasn't talking about it back then, so he didn't start talking about it until like 2011 after they murdered his first wife. So they were just basically just telling him to don't say anything, or we're going to get you. So I think that's why they were doing it. But when Hoffa was murdered, those murders stopped because there was a federal investigation going on, from the federal government into Hoffa's murder. And so all these little kids, they quit killing them and dropping them off on streets and properties that were either owned by Hugh or bore the name of his relatives, of his famous, very wealthy relatives that created most of this country. What's next? There's Hoffa. Now, one of Hugh's relatives was none other than, this would have been his wife at the time, relative, was Joe Jacobs from IBM. At the wedding, Bill Gates was there. So this is why you have all the conspiracy people, all the crazies constantly downing Bill Gates, okay? Bill Gates, his family goes all the way back to Plymouth, okay? They've been generals in every war America's fought. They've employed hundreds of thousands of people in this country. But he's being attacked and lied about today through sound bites and taken out of context and things he doesn't really mean. Why? Because Bill Gates was at the wedding with Hugh's wedding, and Joe Jacobs was there and gave him the information to create the computer. So this is why you have lies about Bill Gates to this day because of his family member. Okay, and then the Gates family. Now, and Gates is actually related to the Gardners. If you look up Gates' dad, I think was married to Gardner. Okay, so there you go. There he's like an in-law, a distant in-law to Hugh's family. So not a coincidence. This is why they look at all this. Look at the things I'm saying. Really think about these things. You've never heard this before. It's covered in all media. You can't Google it. Okay. But it's mentioned in every movie and every song on earth, just about in some way, in subtle ways that you don't usually gather or understand, because they buried the truth under the lie and have made millions, billions, trillions even of dollars burying Hugh and his family. Okay. All the way back to the 1800s. They've been attacking his family. And this comes from the Queen, from England, from the peerage of the Queen, Osbourne. This is why you have his knights always coming over here, making music and movies and taking the money back to England. Sir Elton John. And, I don't know if it was Ozzy Osbourne. Was he a Sir also? That's the same as Osbourne. That's not a coincidence. It's the same people, okay? This is why Harry Osborn on Spider-Man was Spider-Man's enemy. Okay, that's not a coincidence. This is why you have Merkel and Prince Harry Osborn, going into Hollywood right now and making movies after first coming to Canada, saying, "Oh no, we're not going to go to America," and then and the Queen saying, "Oh, she built a theater on her property," at the same time. Oh well, why? Because she sent her kid to America to make more movies and bring back more money back to England. See, this is how this country really works. So the Queen's been attacking the family of the founders of this country. Like I said, they're attacking Bill Gates. Some of you that are going to hear this are going to believe the lies and say, no, Bill Gates is evil. I heard the soundbite. He wants to kill everybody, even while he's creating toilets for Africans that don't use water and things, to try to help prevent the spread of disease and He was like the first one to give, hundreds of millions of dollars to fight coronavirus and find a vaccine and everything. But you think he put metal in it. And, now the newest lie that I heard yesterday is that, there's alien embryos in the vaccines, all lies. Okay. 100% lies. All right. There's no alien embryos in your vaccines. There's no metal things to be detected by satellites, nanobots. These are not in your vaccines. These are lies. But you know why they said there's alien embryos in your vaccines? They said there's alien embryos in your vaccines to hide the real truth that Johnson & Johnson uses stem cell lines from the 70s and 80s in the final product. So embryonic stem cell lines in their final product. So if you get a Johnson & Johnson vaccine, you have stem cell lines from aborted tissue. So they just covered it up with aliens. This is what they do all the time. You ever wonder why Stephen Greer is such an well-known UFOologist? Well, it's because Greer was JFK's driver of the limo. It's unbelievable, isn't it? So I know it's a huge video, but I just keep going on. There's so much. You could talk about Hugh's story for hours and days, and you couldn't possibly exhaust it. It would fill libraries around the world, and it actually does fill libraries, but it's people hiding it. All the books written about Hoffa, every single one of them is either written by somebody making a huge amount of money that works for aliens, like Coast to Coast wrote a book about it, or like people that used to work with Hugh at the time wrote books about it, lied about Hoffa. Okay, well, why did they do that? But they never mention Hugh. Every book you read is just another cover up of a cover up. Aliens used to cover everything. Gosh, the Kennedy story is really covered in the media. Nightmare on Elm Street, 114 Elm Street, and 114 became the police code for missing person. And you see that number constantly in the media all the time. You just don't pay attention, so you don't realize that they're doing it, but they're covering up what they did in the media. That's why you had a German Freddy Krueger, Nightmare on Elm Street, right? They cover it up. And you had Walker, Texas Ranger, and Walker was with Oswald. Detective Walker was with Oswald as he was shot. Who's the Bush family again? That's the Walker family, right? Running the CIA is kind of like a family thing now. You see now they just had Walker. I think was her name Gina. I think Gina Walker was also just running the FBI until recently, or the CIA until recently. So running the CIA, that's apparently a family thing. So it's cover up over cover. Walker, Texas Ranger, you see. Walker's the good guy that created the Texas Ranger. No, that's a lie. That's another lie and a cover-up of Hugh's story as well, because it's actually another one of his uncles, Gonzalez. Okay, his family, Gonzalez family, created the actual Texas Rangers. So it's a cover-up of a cover-up. More and more lies. Yeah, the Texas Rangers was actually created by a Mexican immigrant. I know. Where's that in your history? But that's the truth that Hugh has been passed down through his family. You understand? Constant lies. Stephen Greer. And Greer was the limo driver. Interesting. Hill jumps on the limo behind Hugh, or behind Hugh. Start that sentence over. Hill was the CIA agent that jumped on the limo and jumped over Jacqueline Kennedy as JFK was shot. And it just so happens that Benny Hill was his first name Benny. He was the first UFO abductee, right? And Greer just happens, the limo driver happens to be the UFOologist that's real famous today, right? Sees all the UFOs. Total coincidence. No, that's not your media complex that Kennedy was talking about and possibly going to stop as he was addressing the Tribune publishers in 1963, just before he was murdered. You see what they did? The people that were killing him, they took over all media and they covered it all up with UFOs, with your S4. And Hugh Squier at 4 years old was taken by Osbourne and abducted and raped in a basement with Daryl Hall standing off in the corner doing sexual things, to himself. Yeah, the musician, the guy from Hall & Oates, that guy. Let's see. So we've got to 1975, and there's so many things that can be mentioned. I can't say them all. Then we'll go to the Oklahoma City bombing. Now, when was that? 90, 93, 95? I think it was 93. Look it up. Now, Hugh had gone into Michigan. He was in Michigan at the time. He goes to a donut shop, and he sits down and orders a donut, brand new donut shop. I think it was called, might have been Shelby Donuts. I can't remember. And two guys in black ties, they come by and they sit by him, and they just start talking to him. And they say, well, you never know what's going to blow up tonight. And the other one says, no. And I'm paraphrasing. I might get the words slightly wrong. He says, yeah, you never know. And they got up and they left. And that day, Oklahoma City bombing blew up. Okay, the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building was blown up in Oklahoma City. Interesting, isn't it? Now, that was a tax building. That's important. Okay, this was a federal tax building. And a few years earlier, well, no, it was more than a few. It was about 10, 13, about 15 years earlier. Hugh had lived on a property in Michigan. This was about 78, 79, roughly. He was living on a property in Michigan that was sold to him or rented out to him by the Mazar family, who is Donald Trump's tax lawyers. Remember, tax building destroyed. Now, on this property, and Hugh didn't know it at the time. He was playing for Bottom Line. He was a band member. He didn't know it at the time, but there was a drug ring going on in the back of the property. There was like several houses on this really big farm property, and they were selling drugs and buying and selling drugs and operating a big CIA drug ring. How do we know it's CIA? There were two people buying it, and there were more famous names too, but I'm going to keep it a little bit simpler. There were two people that were buying and selling drugs on the property. You know what they were? McVeigh and Nichols. Oh. And who was blamed for the Oklahoma City bombing? McVeigh and Nichols, about 15 years later. You see, Hugh turned in the drugs because they were killing little kids on the property. Okay, with their drugs. Little kids were walking onto their property high, and he'd had enough of it. At first, he's like, I don't care what they do. They're in a bat, whatever. But then all these little kids started coming on, and people were dying of these freaking drugs. He's like, I had enough of this. And he turned it into the freaking FBI. Okay, and it was related to the CIA, and it eventually led to the Oklahoma City bombing, and to George Bush having to go to Noriega, to go kill Noriega down in Nicaragua. Unfreaking real. You see what was covered up on 9/11? All of this. CIA drug rings, pedophilia, the murder of Kennedy, the murder of Admiral Byrd, the theft of Hugh's trademark. Now, I mentioned to you that his band that he started was named Bottom Line. Well, that was stolen again and again and again and again. While he was still a teenager, not really able to do anything about it. John F. Kennedy's press secretary, Neville Fletcher, I think that was his name. I have the book on my shelf. He stole Hugh's registered legal trademark and called the name of his book Bottom Line. It's a fiction book, Unbelievable, right? But he wasn't the only one. The Lawyers Bar stole the word bottom line and created all their tests and all their websites based on the word bottom line. This is why the WWF and Stone Cold Steve Austin comes and says that's the bottom line because Stone Cold said so. You see. So let's talk about the WWF. We mentioned how in 1989, 12 years before 9/11, Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage were battling another tag team, and he said the Twin Towers are going to come crumbling down, And they did 12 years later, didn't they? Why did the WWF know that? Well, like we said, Hugh's baby pictures had already been used to create the plan for 9/11. The Pentagon construction began on 9/11, didn't it? His baby picture said George Towers. The guy was the name of the guy that took his baby pictures. And old George Bush destroyed the Twin Towers. So they were already planning to cover up the theft of everything they were taking from him. Remember, Hugh at this time was a federal publisher. He had his FCC licenses, and he became an ASCAP member and a publisher all around the world. There's 26,000 or 28,000 contracts that he could publish and make money being this sort of a publisher. Lots of money involved here. Yeah, a small amount of money a lot of things were missing on 9/11. That's right, Thomas. The gold at the bottom of the World Trade Center. Yeah, it all went to China probably with the steel. All the steel ended up going to China, being sold to Chinese companies, all along with the gold, no doubt, right? They never tell you that either, do they? So anyway, gosh, there's so much Hugh stories. It's just hard to keep it all straight. So bottom line, we're talking about bottom line and that registered trademark that Hugh created. It was stolen by every lawyer in the country. We have one picture of it on the website in California Lawyers Bar, the one that Kamala Harris went to. She was her husband was an entertainment lawyer, and that's why she uses the name Harris. Oh, that's Hugh's part of his family, part of his heritage, part of his line. Remember, we mentioned earlier that he's the last surviving male descendant of the Harris line that was with Ford or that was with Lincoln at Ford's theater, Clara Harris. That's why Kamala Harris pretends to be that Harris line. That's why she doesn't take her husband's name, Hoff, right? Oh, Hoffa, like Jimmy Hoffa. That's not a coincidence either. Yeah. So that word bottom line was stolen by the WWE. But who's the WWE? Well, the WWE was started by DuPont, or partly by DuPont. And DuPont goes all the way back. They made the thoroughbred horse. They raised the thoroughbred horses that Jacqueline Kennedy fell off of. Oh, and who was with Jacqueline Kennedy when she died? Oh, Graham. Isn't that interesting? Graham Media from Michigan. We've already talked about this ad nauseum. When you own the media, this is how the media covers it up. So Graham Media, and DuPont obviously knew each other, didn't they? The DuPont family and Graham. This is why the WWE knew. There was a club in New York City called the Bottom Line. I know their names of the people that started it. Hugh and I have talked about it a lot, but my head can't bring it to the front of my brain at the moment. Maybe it'll come to me. Snadowski, something like that. Snadowski, something like that. And yeah, they stole the club in New York City, name Bottom Line, and created it for that club in New York City. And all your musicians got their start out of that club. That's absolutely right, Thomas. Very brilliant observation. Pepper and Sandowski or Snadowski or whatever his name is. Yeah, so it kind of come back to me. So they stole, and even their names are in all kinds of media covered up, because you cover up when you tell a lie, you have to cover up more and more and more. The lies just always grow. So we now are, 70 years from World War II, and the lies have just grown and grown and grown. And now they just throw aliens at everything, So that's how you lie about everything now. It's just lies. So yeah, brilliant observation, Thomas. Yeah, the bottom line, the New York City bar there, that was done to as part of the theft and cover up of what was done to Hugh. Okay, and that's the music industry, and that's why you have Ozzy Osbourne, you know, and that's why you had Johnny Cash, who walked the line, or Tom Petty and the Long Twin Silver Line. Okay, that's the bottom line that they're talking about, and this is why these people get promoted, because either their song or their name or something about, or they're related to the right people who are stealing and causing these problems, and are, you know, they may be the pedophiles themselves, or the family or peerage of the queen. Or this is why people like Johnny Cash that can't sing or play a guitar are vaunted real high up, you know. And all movies are like that too. So brilliant observation, Thomas. That's a very big piece of the theft of bottom line. Well, the WWE knew it through DuPont, okay, what they were going to do and what they were planning and how they were going to cover up the theft that they had stolen from Hugh of bottom line on 9/11. All those trademarks, all of his tax receipts, his publisher's license, everything that they had done to Hugh, they buried it on 9/11. Okay, that's all those things were in the Twin Towers. That's where that's where ASCAP kept its is their trademarks and stuff like that was in the World Trade Center. So all that was going to get buried. Okay, imagine why Jim Marrs, author Jim Marrs, was murdered as he started looking into Hughes, and they'll never tell you he was murdered, but it's just a coincidence. He died of a heart attack, you know, based on kidney failure, right as he was looking into Hughes' story and looking into his tax records, right, on 9/11, right? Or not on 9/11, but that were buried on 9/11. So bottom line was all going to be buried on 9/11. And they had this plan. DuPont knew it. The WWF knew it. And now let's talk about for a second the movie Back to the Future. Back to the Future has a scene, and people get this partially right. Some people are smart enough. You see a few YouTube videos that get a piece of it. They see the 9/11. They see the Twin Pines sign, and it says 116, which is 9/11 upside down, right? You know, and 9/11's in another part of the movie. Well, the terrorists come in, and there's the sign, and it says 116, 9/11 upside down. The Twin Pines, the terrorists come, and Marty McFly and the professor are there. And, you know, it's obviously a terrorist situation, right? And 9/11 right there. Well, what's the Twin Pines? Now, this part should blow your mind. See, for those that know Hugh's story, Hugh at 5 years old, or maybe even 4 a little bit, back in the days when milk trucks existed, he worked for a guy at Twin Pines Dairy, okay? Twin Pines. That's what it said. Twin Pines Mall on Back to the Future, right? And he would, you know, and I say work for, but he was just handed a little bit of cash. He would run the milk from the truck to the, you know, to the business and drop it in wherever they dropped it. Back in the days when they deliver milk door to door, you know, it was back in like the, you know, 61 or something. So there's a club called the Double Set. Oh, that's amazing, Thomas. Yeah. Flight 77. Isn't that amazing? See, you'll discover, the more you look into this, you'll discover more and more about how they covered up Hugh over and over and over, and cover-ups of cover-ups of cover-ups of cover-ups. So Hugh worked for DuPont, for Twin Pines Dairy, and DuPont painted the trucks. They made the paint. And that's why you had the clown, Milky the Clown, that was their spokesman back then. And you got pictures of Milky the Clown and the Clowns Union people in old newspapers and stuff with Ronald McDonald and old clowns. And there was actually a Clowns Union in Detroit. Yeah, lots of unions in Detroit. And Milky the Clown, I think when he quit being the spokesperson for Twin Pines Dairy, started working for DuPont. You see how it's connected there. So that's why you had Twin Pines Mall and a terrorist attack. These people had known about 9/11 for a generation. Okay. They were planning this way in advance. Again, not the Pentagon construction began on 9/11. Okay. This is what was on Hugh's baby pictures. So we talked about JFK. We talked about Graham and Osbourne, the Oakland City child killing. We talked about Jimmy Hoffa. We talked about Oklahoma City. Talked about 9/11. All that was buried under the Twin Towers, everything they stole from Hugh. The plane, Flight 90, was it Flight 95 that hit Pennsylvania? All just happened to hit that field where the boy in the box, Hugh's twin, was buried when he was 5 years old. We talked about how Hugh had a legal case against the Groves family, the family that founded the Pentagon, that was in the Pentagon by the time 9/11 happened. And that's why the Pentagon was not hit by an airplane, obviously. Anybody that has any sense knows that and can see that that little tiny hole at ground level is way smaller than the size of a airplane fuselage. There's no wings there at the base of the Pentagon as the airplane hit that had been ripped off. There's no marks where the wings of the airplane entered the building. And we're supposed to believe an airplane hit the Pentagon. And yet the most surveilled place on the earth doesn't have massive amounts of footage of an airplane hitting it. Gee. Obviously that was done on purpose. And there's so much more. You say, well, why didn't Hugh keep trying to sue and stuff? Well, several of his lawyers have been murdered. One on the way to file a case for Hugh once. One judge was killed that had granted custody of his kid to, or of his wife's kid. I can't remember exactly. Anyway, it's a custody dispute, and the judge had ruled in Hugh's favor, and the name of the judge was Stair, Hunter D. Stair. D is his middle initial. Hunter D. Stair was murdered after doing that for Hugh, or not for, but cited in Hugh's favor. Was murdered at Selfridge Air National Guard. Well, Selfridge Air National Guard was the place that sent the airplanes to guard New York City airspace. Oh, and Dick Cheney just happened to call off the Selfridge Air National Guard from protecting New York City airspace suspiciously 30 minutes before the planes hit the buildings. You see? This is how connected all this is. And these killers, they're all over the country. These people that kill his wives, and he's had 4 wives murdered. Unbelievable. This is just such a big story, and it's all intertwined together. I have here demand justice. What I'm talking about is demand justice not only for the victims of 9/11, okay, for the victims of the Oakland County child killings in Michigan, but also demand justice for the murder of Hugh's wives. Thomas says, and the FBI thugs who fit not in their clothes to remove the evidence. I'm not familiar with that specifically, Thomas. I'll try to remember to look into that. So one of Hugh's wives, well, 2 of Hugh's wives were murdered in a place in Tennessee where he was living at the time that he had bought from a guy named Manning. So he affectionately referred to it as the Manning Ranch. Okay. And it was actually a Civil War battlefield at one point. Anyway, he was living on this property that he called the Manning Ranch, and he had started a computer business. Long story. Okay, I can't give you all the details. It's just too complicated. It's too big. It's too much to say. But at the time, he was living in Tennessee, and this house, this ranch house that he lived on, was called the Manning Ranch, and he started a computer business. And Major Garrett, the CBS White House correspondent, and remember, Kennedy's White House correspondent, Fletcher Neville, stole Bottom Line, the word, and created a book by that title. Well, the CBS White House correspondent, Major Garrett, was sending Hugh computers. All right. The computers, when Hugh took out the hard drives, had Hillary's 30,000 emails on them. Amazing, isn't it? Now, he didn't read the emails, but he saw their titles and knew what they were. Remember, like I said, he was unusually smart, okay? Really knows what he's doing with computers and things too. Remember, he designed assembly lines in Michigan for he knew John DeLorean. He knew Lee Iacocca. He worked at the Chrysler and the Ford lines and created assembly lines and robots, and a really smart guy. Okay. Well, at the time he was living in Tennessee on the Manning Ranch, and he had a computer business. Major Garrett had sent Hugh those 30,000 missing emails on laptops. All right. And Hugh still has on his phone that Garrett's name on there. Okay. He called himself Tom Garrett after a movie, he changed it just a little bit. And this is why you now have a Tom Garrett that works for CBS, because lies have to be covered up with more lies, you see. But this was Major Garrett at the time. Well, Major Garrett created the story of Bradley Manning becoming Chelsea Manning at the same time he and Obama murdered Hugh's wife at the Manning Ranch. And she was the second of his wives that was murdered at that ranch. So it's amazing what they've done to him. And this is why I have up here, demand justice. This country is full of killers. This is the biggest story on the face of the planet, and it needs to be told. So one more story, and that's the Las Vegas shooting. It's the last one. The picture from the lawn at the Pentagon. There was one picture, Thomas, I think you might be talking about. There was a little blur. And that blur to me looks a lot more like a missile. And of course, Bush was president, and Walker, was with his last name or middle name Walker, right? It's the Walker family. The same Detective Walker was with Oswald, as Oswald was shot. Hugh, by the way, also rented property from Jack Ruby, but I don't have time to get into that right now. From the carousel in Michigan. So anyway, that's another story. And that's why Jack Ruby's shoes are with Garland shoes at the Smithsonian. The Wizard of Oz we talked about earlier. So anyway, so the Las Vegas shooting, back to Las Vegas shooting. So in 2016, late 16 and 17, Hugh went to Michigan to try to find justice, to get one last attempt to try to get the police officer, that I didn't tell you his name, L. Brooks Patterson, who saw him come out of Osbourne's basement at 4 years old and laughed at him. He was running naked, and rather than help the poor little 4-year-old kid, just laughed at him. L. Brooks Patterson, the policeman. Well, he's really well known in Detroit area politics, and you can look him up and learn all kinds of things about L. Brooks Patterson. Very evil, wicked guy, in my opinion. Laughed at Hugh Squier, who was sitting in a squad car, policeman at the time. Anyway, he went to go meet L. Brooks Patterson in Michigan in late 2016, early 2017. The story is long, but to make a long story short, he, at the end of that, was coming back out west to where he lives, and he was in Las Vegas taking pictures of the former Red Garter clubs that became Bottom Line clubs, I believe, if I got that right. Another theft of his trademark. And he was taking pictures of it. And he's got video and stuff, and you can go right there on Facebook and see his videos, okay, of him doing this. And this was the very day of 10/1/17, as he was taking these videos, that the Oklahoma City bombing happened. And they killed a Originally, it said, now they've changed the report since then, but originally they said pi number of, in reverse, 430, or 314 backwards, 413, 413 people were shot originally, you know. Now it's a bigger number, but the ones that I clipped years ago, that's what it said. And then, you know, pi is all over reports in the media too, but I don't have time to get into that. So this is part of the military codes that they use. So throw gematria out the window. It's not gematria, guys. Okay. There's a guy out there related to the founder of Scientology, possibly. He says he isn't, but same last name. You know, throwing out a calculator that's got a lot of you know, there may be a tiny bit of truth here and there to some of the things he says, but the reason they created that calculator and the reason that they create everything that actually gains any traction in media or the internet or in movies or music are people that are hiding Hugh's truth. So he'll take stories, attach a bunch of baloney numbers to it that have absolutely nothing to do with Hugh's story, and he'll always omit Hugh, just like all the books about Hoffa, you know, just like all the books about Kennedy do. And Hugh's been involved in some capacity in every single one of these stories: Oklahoma City, 9/11, Las Vegas. So, and it's impossible to give you all the details of every single one of these things. So I'm crunching. It took an hour and a half just to sort of to barely name them, right, and to just barely go into the surface details of it. But that's Hugh's life. And now, just like John DeLorean, they've holed him up in a little tiny private residence out west. You know, John DeLorean died in a little tiny apartment. Guy who created the car that was on Back to the Future. And isn't it interesting that Time magazine, when they arrested John DeLorean, put on the cover, "Bottom line busted," with a picture of John DeLorean. You see what was going on there? And they've done this exact same thing to Hugh. They've holed him up, stripped him of everything, took everything from him, and now he lives in a little tiny private residence out west after murdering his wife at the time and 3 other wives. Okay, well, a fiance, and you know. So anyway, four women in his lives that were murdered, bought straight from the government. I mean, this comes from the people that did 9/11, from the people that killed Kennedy. Here's your name. We've made plenty of connections for anybody to be able to see this, that has an honest mind and an honest attitude to want to know the future, or want to know the truth. I'm sorry. So that's what's really going on in your country. That's what's covered up everywhere in all movies, in all music. So I think I'll just stop it right here. Thanks for watching, everybody. And please share it. Please like, share, subscribe. I don't care to be famous. I don't monetize. But justice needs to be done for these women, for these children that were murdered and raped. Osbourne needs to become a famous name with Graham, Senator Graham. These are your pedophile families that run the media, that run the FBI today, and cover up all truth with the help of movies and media, Graham, radio. Okay, this is Graham. This is why you got Rush Limbaugh, the drug dealer. You know, it was advanced because of Graham. Okay, so many things to get into, but we just can't do it all in one night. Yeah, thanks, Thomas, man. Great observation on the club. See you later.